Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at Loveworld USA News tonight. First, a quick look at the top stories this evening. White House pushes back on prayer criticism as Gavin Newsom echoes Psaki after church shooting. Trump appointee files second criminal referral targeting Fed Governor Lisa Cook. President Donald Trump weighs guard deployment. Major ICE surge in Chicago. Illegal immigrant crimes under spotlight. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott signs Texas map, adding 5 GOP-leaning U.S. House seats as Democrats vow court fight. Trump administration rescinds $679 million for offshore wind project, redirects funds to ports. I'm Joel Richard, and now to the news. The White House has defended public calls to prayer after California Governor Gavin Newsom backed MSNBC host Jen Psaki's claim that prayer is not freaking enough in the wake of the Minneapolis church shooting that killed 2 children during a back-to-school mass. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called Psaki's remarks incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith, adding, "We believe in the power of prayer, and I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families who need it right now more than ever." Responding to Vice President Vance's point that Americans can both pray and work to prevent violence, Governor Newsom replied, "Do both then." He had earlier echoed Psaki's critique, writing that the students at Annunciation Catholic School were literally praying as they got shot at. As the clash spotlights a widening cultural divide over whether public calls to prayer are meaningful or performative, for Christians, prayer is both a command and a starting point for action, comforting the brokenhearted, serving the wounded, and pursuing just, wise policies that protect the vulnerable. Let's take a look.
I have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
Democrats, including former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, attacked prayer and pushed gun control in the aftermath of yesterday's shooting. What's the White House's response to their comments?
Yes, I saw the comments of my predecessor, Ms. Psaki, and frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith. And I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families themselves who need it right now more than ever.
My second question for you is...
Very stirring news indeed. In other news, Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Polta has sent a second criminal referral to the Justice Department seeking an investigation of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, less than 2 weeks after his initial request. In an August 28th letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and Special Attorney Edward Martin, Polter said he was reiterating his August 15th referral and providing new information involving a third property. He alleges Cook made multiple false representations to the government about the occupancy status of homes in Michigan, Georgia, and Massachusetts. The first referral claimed Cook identified both a Michigan home and 2 weeks later a Georgia condo as her primary residence in 2021. The new letter says an April 2021 mortgage for a Massachusetts condo was listed as a second home, but later described to the government as an investment and a rental. Cook's attorney, Abby Dave Lowell, dismissed the claims as a smear campaign by a political operative, calling the allegations vague and unsubstantiated and unrelated to her responsibilities at the central bank. They in no way justify her removal from the board, he said. The referrals land amid a high-stakes fight over Cook's job. Just earlier this week, President Donald Trump sent Cook a letter asserting he was removing her from the Board of Governors for a cause, the legal threshold for firing a Fed governor. Cook has not accepted the action and has filed suit to block it, setting up a potential court test of presidential removal power and the Fed's institutional independence. More news on the Trump administration. The Trump administration is considering deploying National Guard troops and staging a major ICE operation from Naval Station Great Lakes to confront violent crime and illegal immigration in the Chicago area, intensifying the White House's law and order push after its Washington, D.C. crackdown. President Donald Trump recently blasted Chicago's leadership as grossly incompetent, as DHS officials highlighted recent arrests of criminal non-citizens in the region, including alleged members of Tren de Aragua and MS-13, and convictions for crimes such as predatory criminal sexual assault of children, and also homicide. We are arresting and removing the worst of the worst, a DHS statement said, crediting ICE and CBP for ramped-up enforcement. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson condemned any federal troop deployment as unlawful, warning it would strain community police relations and undermine the historic progress we have made. The administration counters that federal resources are aimed at protecting families and removing dangerous offenders, while urging otherwise law-abiding undocumented residents to depart voluntarily. The federal surge in D.C., paired with National Guard support, has become the template the White House is eyeing for other blue-run cities. Local business owners in Chicago say urgency is warranted. The city is not safe, Sam Sanchez says. We're human beings, not statistics. In other news, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas today signed into law a mid-decade congressional map that Republicans say creates 5 additional GOP-leaning U.S. House districts, capping a tumultuous redistricting push that saw Texas Democrats flee the state to block a vote after ultimately returning for a second special session. Republican authors argued the plan improves Republican political performance while increasing competition and drawing 4 of the 5 new districts as majority Hispanic. This map ensures fairer representation, Abbott wrote on X. Democrats blasted the overhaul as illegal and racially discriminatory and said they will sue to overturn it. The fight in Austin has already spurred a blue state counterpunch. California Democrats approved their own map that adds 5 Democratic-leaning seats, though it must clear a November ballot measure before taking effect. Texas Republicans pressed ahead after the Democratic walkout collapse. GOP leaders sought civil arrest warrants for absent members, and the House rejected a dozen Democratic amendments before final passage. Republicans say the Texas map is aimed at safeguarding their narrow U.S. House majority heading into the 2026 midterms and preventing a repeat of Democrats' 2018 gains. Democrats are expected to challenge the plan under the Voting Rights Act and the Constitution, setting up a fast-moving legal battle that could reshape House control and the fate of President Donald Trump's agenda ahead of next year's elections. Watch this.
This is Governor Greg Abbott. I'm about to sign the law that creates the one big, beautiful map that ensures fairer representation in the United States Congress for Texans. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Burrows, Senator King, Representative Todd Hunter, Representative Cody Vasut, and all of the legislature who stayed in the Capitol and got this law to my desk. Texas is now more red in the United States Congress.
We'll be back with more news after this break.
Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project is all about making sure the voice of our man of God, Pastor Chris Oyakhilome, arrives exactly when someone needs it the most. It's a global campaign to saturate the world with the gospel of our Lord Jesus like never before.
The gospel is going to go into places that it never was before, into disciplines and areas that it never was before, and establish a higher way of life.
Make a global impact today with your sponsorship of Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. For every home you sponsor, you send the gospel where it's never gone. You become the reason someone receives life, a second chance, and finds Jesus. Through the dynamic Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project, we've been able to expand our global mission, touching more souls, more regions, and producing a wave of powerful testimonies from people whose lives have been forever changed. Your financial support as a Loveworld USA partner is not just generous, it's supernatural power for global impact. Let's keep sending the gospel into every home through the Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. Sign up today and sponsor any of the following categories.
It's time for you to give the right sacrifice, the right seed, because it's time for you to get the right harvest.
You can sponsor Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project by calling or going on our website now. Sign up to be Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project partner today. God bless you.
Welcome back. The Transportation Department today canceled $679 million in federal funding for a dozen offshore wind projects across 11 states, intensifying the Trump administration's rollback of the sector. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy called the grants wasteful, saying resources would be shifted to real infrastructure improvements as the White House prioritizes fossil fuel expansion over renewables. The rescissions include $435 million for a floating wind project off Northern California and $47 million tied to a Maryland deployment the Interior Department has moved to cancel. Separately, the Energy Department withdrew a $716 million loan guarantee for New Jersey grid upgrades linked to offshore wind. The moves follow last week's stop work order on the nearly complete Revolution Wind project serving Rhode Island and Connecticut, now under a national security review. Democrats and union leaders condemned the actions as job-killing and harmful to state climate goals. Danish developer Ørsted, which leads Revolution Wind, said it is assessing financial impacts and weighing legal options. The administration counters that offshore wind is costly and unreliable, arguing funds are better spent on ports and traditional infrastructure. President Donald Trump has pledged to curb new wind and solar development, blaming renewables for rising electricity prices. Energy analysts attribute recent costs more to surging AI-driven demand, aging grids, and extreme weather. The cancellations add to a series of administration steps to limit offshore wind leasing and permitting while promoting oil, gas, and coal. And on the business front, Delta Airlines agreed to pay $79 million to settle a class action lawsuit stemming from a 2020 incident in which a Boeing 777 dumped about 15,000 gallons of fuel over neighborhoods near Los Angeles International Airport, including several schoolyards, before making an emergency landing. The January 14, 2020 flight to Shanghai returned to LAX after one engine lost thrust shortly after takeoff, according to court filings. Pilots released fuel to reduce weight. And Los Angeles County officials said nearly 60 students and teachers at schools in Cudahy were evaluated for minor skin and respiratory irritation. None required hospitalization. The settlement resolves claims brought by the teachers and later homeowners who said they were exposed to fuel that drizzled down like raindrops, causing physical and emotional harm. Delta said it settled without admitting liability, citing the cost and distraction of a trial. Delta's filings said the jet exceeded its maximum landing weight by roughly 160,000 pounds, and that dumping fuel reduced the risk associated with an overweight landing on one engine. The airline did not immediately comment on the agreement. Speaking of oil, Shell Oil Company is facing a federal lawsuit alleging the oil major's corporate reorganization discriminated against white employees in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. The complaint, filed by America First Legal in the Southern District of Texas, centers on workers in Shell's security division who say they were forced to reapply for their jobs, subjected to new in-person assessments, and ultimately replaced by less qualified candidates as part of a DEI-driven shakeup. Plaintiffs contend they had stronger credentials and performance reviews, yet were sidelined or terminated. One former employee and her line manager were let go, with the suit alleging a supervisor offered tear jars as parting gifts, while another, described as the unit's most experienced security advisor, was rapidly reassigned to an off-site location without a Shell office. What our clients experienced should alarm every American, AFL attorney Julie Haller said, arguing the reorganization amounted to a racially motivated purge. Fellow AFL lawyer Jacob Meckler said the overhaul trampled federal law and harmed careers, while the filing seeks relief under Title VII. Now, Shell rejected the accusations. Discrimination is not tolerated, and employment decisions are based on merit, qualifications, and performance, in line with our policies on local laws. We refute these allegations, a company spokesperson said. Now, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more news after this break.
It's easy to set up, quick to start, and packed with value. Smarter streaming starts here with the Alpha TV Stick. Just plug and stream anytime, anywhere. Discover a curated lineup of content designed to inspire, live broadcasts and global events, inspirational films and series, children's programming, healing and teaching sessions, all on demand.
With millions of downloads worldwide, the Alpha TV app is transforming lives across the globe. And now, we're on a mission to reach 1 billion downloads of the Alpha TV app, and you can be part of it. Join the global wave with 1 billion Alpha TV app downloads worldwide. Bring the higher life into every home. Order your Alpha TV Stick today and experience smarter streaming. Alpha, the higher life is here.
Welcome back. We have received more developments on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected proposals for a buffer zone between Ukrainian and Russian forces, arguing it doesn't fit the realities of modern warfare. His remarks followed reports that some European officials had floated a 40-kilometer, 25-mile strip as part of a ceasefire or longer-term deal. President Zelensky said drones have already created a de facto dead or gray zone along the front, forcing heavy weapons to stay more than 10 kilometers apart. He ruled out surrendering any land to form such a zone, adding that if Russia wants distance, it can retreat deeper into occupied Ukrainian territory. He said Moscow isn't ready for real diplomacy, only delays. The comments came as a U.S.-led push for talks loses momentum. Hopes for a summit between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin have faded, with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz saying there will obviously not be a meeting. Meanwhile, Russia launched one of its largest recent barrages on Kiev, firing 629 drones and missiles, killing 23 people and damaging buildings near the EU mission, prompting European outrage. Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, met in New York with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Vice President J.D. Vance, saying Ukraine welcomes U.S. initiatives, but that Russia keeps stalling. EU leaders are working on robust and credible security guarantees. Zelensky expects talks next week on NATO-like commitments, while Moscow dismissed Western proposals as one-sided. With more news on the international front, opposition leader Luis Fernando Camacho was released from jail today and transferred to house arrest after nearly 3 years in pretrial detention over the 2019 crisis that forced President Evo Morales from power. The conservative Christian politician and Santa Cruz governor headed home to the Eastern Economic Hub, where he says he will resume his gubernatorial duties for the first time since his 2022 arrest. Camacho remains charged with sedition and terrorism tied to mass protests that followed Morales' disputed re-election. Morales resigned under military pressure and fled, clearing the way from interim administration led by Camacho ally Janine Áñez as unrest continued. Now, his release follows a rare Supreme Court order last week, directing judges to re-examine lengthy pretrial detentions in several high-profile cases. Reviews are also underway for Áñez and for Marco Antonio Pomari, Camacho's former running mate. Under the ruling, Camacho must remain at his residence while awaiting trial. His legal team hailed the move as a step toward due process, while government allies of Morales criticized the decision as a setback for accountability in the 2019 turmoil. Watch this.
Un saludo a Santa Cruz, mi doctora. Pídese. Santa Cruz, ya estamos de ida, ya está la libertad. Cumplí mi palabra, ni vendido ni cobarde, peor masista. Viva Santa Cruz, y en pocas horas vamos a llegar a seguir defendiendo a nuestro pueblo, a recibir a nuestra gente, el cariño que le tengo y las ganas de poder abrazar a nuestra gente después de casi 3 años. Dios lo bendiga y nos vemos en Santa Cruz. Nos vemos.
Just before we end the news, let's have a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Babadi Bombo Vinediaka. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the top headlines. White House pushes back on prayer criticism as Newsom echoes Psaki after church shooting. Trump appointee files second criminal referral targeting Fed Governor Lisa Cook. President Donald Trump weighs guard deployment, major ICE surge in Chicago. Illegal immigrant crimes under spotlight. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott signs Texas map adding 5 GOP-leaning U.S. House seats as Democrats vow court fight. And the Trump administration rescinds $679 million for offshore wind projects, redirects funds to ports. And that's the news for today. Join us at 2 p.m. Central Time for News Plus. I'm Joel Richard, signing off. Good night, Jesus loves you, and God bless the United States of America.